Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another phenomenal guest. So excited to introduce you guys to her. She has the biggest energy, biggest smile, beautiful red hair, just absolutely the coolest person that Sam Knickerbocker has ever met. This is how she said she wanted me to introduce her on the podcast, but it's not super far off the truth. She is an absolute magnetic energy. Like, she has the energy that everybody wants to be around her and everybody enjoys being around her. So that comes from a lot of different areas, I'm sure, which we're going to get into today. I'm excited. She has the coolest, unique historic, like how she got into what she's doing now is she was training polar bears. And it's just like, who trains polar bears? Who's even ever interacted with a polar bear? Where do polar bears even really live? I don't know the answers to any of those questions, but she does. But really what she's really great at is helping understand how do you inspire and motivate and lead people. And so now that's one of the things that she's going to focus on moving forward is that. But if you get reduced to a killer bear, polar bear, that's how she's going to tease you, like get you to eat cookies, everything. That's how she trains. So it'd be good if you like cookies to be in her class. Right? I'm just teasing.
This is true. This is true.
Honestly, I'm so excited for this. I have so many questions, but before we get into all the questions that I have for you, go through and tell us, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? How did you fall into this, like training polar bears, and how did that get transitioned into what you're doing today?
I grew up with polar bears. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding. I grew up where polar bears could be found back then. So normally polar bears are in the Arctic and Canada and up in the circle up there, where it's cold. When I was growing up, though, we had polar bears at the Reed Park Zoo in Tucson, in Arizona. I was that kid. I knew that. I know you're making the face. It's weird. They can live in hot climates like that. I'll give you your first animal fact of the day, Sam. They can live in hot climates like that because of their thick blubber. Yes, it helps them when they live in the Arctic to stay warmer and at that temperature, but it also helps them if it's hot. Kind of keeps them at kind of a level temperature, I guess you could say. So there's that. I was that kid that knew I wanted to work with animals. I wanted to help animals and be part of conservation and teaching people how to be part of conservation and helping animals. And so that's exactly what I did. I was that very determined kid. I volunteered at the zoo in Tucson first, and then I was an intern after I volunteered. And then by the age of about 20, I was one of the youngest trainers. I had my own space that I was overseeing. So polar bears, lions, Mansell baboons, Aldabra tortoises. It was crazy. And through that was really the foundation of learning how to love and appreciate wildlife and also working with people. I had thought forever that I was just going to work with animals. People joke that animals are easier. They don't talk back. They have their own spicy attitudes sometimes. But I worked there for a while, and then I had the chance to move to San Diego and work at the San Diego Zoo. And when I was at the San Diego Zoo, I had the chance to work with a variety of different animals there. The unique part about what I did, though, when I was at the San Diego Zoo was not just train the animals, I was training the people to train the animals, if that makes sense. So I was teaching them how to use animals and go out for presentations with animals. And then it really just completely shifted into the people side and focusing on training people. So I was in operations, I was in leadership, and that's when it really shifted of the work that I was doing. It wasn't that I didn't love the animal side of things, but I really had to ask myself, like, what piece of this is what I really love? The whole picture was great. I was working with animals and people and all of that. But I really wanted to hone in the area that was bringing the most passion. And so I continued to ask myself, what area of this is the area that's bringing me the most passion? And that's when I realized it wasn't necessarily the animal side. Yes, I love animals, I still do. And at the same time, it was really the people. How do I build people? And so at that point, I shifted and really focused on people and leadership and culture of people and growing people. And I had a handful of jobs after that. There was kind of a mismatch at times with the company I was working with and the role. Sometimes I worked for a company that had a great culture and the role just was not a good fit for me. And then other times I was working for a company where maybe the role was perfect, but the culture wasn't great. So again, I had to ask myself that question of what part of this is the part that's bringing me passion? Yeah, maybe it was a company that had great culture, but if the role wasn't the right fit for me, how do I improve that piece and tap into the culture side? And vice versa, right? If it was a company that didn't have a good culture, but the role was really great, okay, what is the piece that's really the component bringing me passion? And so then what happened, I was working for a marketing company. I loved my role. The culture wasn't that great, but I was really working on the team and building the team. And they had some financial situations going on. They laid off all of the executives, including myself. And so at that point, I really had the opportunity and the push to do full time what I had already been building on the side. I will also say in that, Sam, I went years, okay, I shouldn't say years. I went a really, really long time not even telling that piece of the story to people. I left that part out completely about being laid off. I simply told people, oh, I work for this big marketing company and I moved on. Now that I look back, I really have started to add that piece into the story because there's a lot of pieces of our journey that we don't necessarily have control over as we're defining those pieces of passion. And one of those pieces is you can't really control when a company really just doesn't have budget and they lay off all their executives, right? Some of the other roles I've had, I've gotten headhunted and pulled in a direction that maybe I wouldn't have chosen, right? So there's some of these pivotal moments that shift you that you don't necessarily choose, but you also at the same time can still continue to ask yourself, like, what part of these pieces is really bringing passion to my life? And so over the last few years now, I have focused on building a community and building a business that is focused on building thriving people and building thriving companies. So it's all company culture, it's all people culture. If you can build great companies, you're building great people, you're building great communities, everybody just kind of thrives in all of that. So I've been really honing in these moments throughout my life of where can I really find some passion? And then more so now as I've grown this business, I focus so much on the connection piece. And you've heard me talk about connection. So the connection piece now, the questions I ask myself is, how can I make this relationship even deeper? How can I build this relationship even further? It's not just, cool, we're clients of each other. No, like I want to know you. I want to know your family. Before we got on, I was asking you, okay, which kiddo is which in the picture? So I'm constantly asking that question now that I've really honed in on the passion piece. Now it really is, okay, how do I build these relationships for everybody else? How do I make them deeper and build the community even more now? And so in a nutshell, that's kind of my journey from polar bears to people. No more training polar bears, but there is a lot of reinforcement that I use with teams. And sometimes it means giving them cookies and giving them treats, just like you would give a polar bear a treat.
Hey, cookies are good.
Yeah.
They were good.
Everyone's got their own little piece of positive reinforcement that they like. So
yeah,
figure this out.
I like it. So let's go back to the beginning, because I feel like you left some things out. I don't know what you left out. I don't know why you left it out, but now you've just told me that you leave stuff out for whatever reason, which we're going to get to another time. But like in your family dynamic, what was your family dynamic? Brothers, sisters, parents, how did they respond to you being an animal lover?
So it's mom and dad and my brother. I think they kind of knew I was always that odd kid. I had, I was the young one that wanted to volunteer at the zoo. Sam, I was a magician's assistant at one point. Let's see how nerdy we can get. I was in a yo-yo magazine at one point. Like,
interesting.
The level of nerdiness, it runs deep. I'm cooler now than I've ever been in my life. So I think they just kind of were like, this is Kindra's thing. She wants to play with animals. And then as I grew through the industry as a person and in the industry of working with animals and being able to take people on tours, and I could tell you about all the different animals and all the animal facts. And it got to the point where I kind of I reverse trained my family almost. And so now we can no longer go to the zoo and just walk around the zoo like a normal human. I remember years and years ago, before my dad passed away, we were at the zoo and he goes, "Hey, let's go hand feed the hippo." I was like, "Dad, we don't hand feed hippos." He's like, "Yeah, you can." I was like, "No, that's not like a thing, Dad." He's like, "Yeah, you can. Let's go hand feed the hippo." And I realized that years before that, we had hand fed a baby hippo. And I was like, oh, he thinks that's a normal thing now. And then we'd be walking around the zoo. He'd be like, "Hey, let's take their cart and drive now." I'm like, "Dad, we can't do that." He's like, "Yeah, you can. You have the key to their cart." I'm like, "No, I have the key to my cart, but it's not here." "Yeah, but it's the same key that goes to their cart. Let's just take their cart and drive around the zoo." I'm like, this isn't how this works. But again, I had reverse trained him into thinking this was like a normal thing. So my family then went to the complete opposite spectrum of being able to visit zoos. And now they know that they can ask all the questions and they can get all of the behind the scenes moments. And so they really loved that piece of me and that part of me. That I will say, as I shifted and grew more on the people side of things, then I had to again retrain them of why I was focusing on people and not animals. They were so used to that, like, "Oh, you're not going to play with the animals anymore?" I'm like, "Well, no, I like the people side." "Yeah, but we like feeding animals."
And I think that that's an important thing that happens. It's a thing that comes up in almost everybody's life. There's different contracts in our lives or roles that we play, and many of the contracts in our lives are implied contracts, meaning they're not really ever specified, they're not really ever talked about, but there's something that we adopt or seem to adopt, and it just happens that way that other people start to expect that of us, even though we never said that they should or could expect that of us. Because it's a passion of ours at that moment, then they start to expect that of us. And that can cause a lot of disruption when somebody's trying to transition, because there's a book called 177 Mental Toughness Secrets by Steve Siebold. And one of the first chapters in there, he talks about how by the age of 8 years old, pretty much everybody is addicted from a neurological perspective to the addiction of approval of others. And that addiction is harder to break than heroin or like actual drugs, the addiction to the approval of others. And I imagine you train animals to be addicted to your approval to a degree, right? They want to please you. People want to please you. So it's good to have that skill and know how to do that. How do you do that ethically, though? How do you make sure that although you want people to behave in a certain way that's conducive to society and, on a grand scale, we also want to allow people to feel comfortable to be individual, to feel comfortable to have a career change, to feel comfortable to do these things and still be socially aware that, hey, maybe this is the time to please others. This is the time to just do your own thing. And there's a balancing act there. So how did you balance that, one, with your family, but also how does that play into your training of animals or people?
Yeah, that balance was the beginning of Kindra learning to focus on Kindra. And I'll be honest, there's been little moments in my life where I'm like, cool, let's focus on me. And then life happens, right? And you have families and significant others and kids, and you get pulled into all of these different directions of focusing on everybody else. That just happened to fall during a time in my life of transition to really focus and go, okay, is this really what I want to do? And again, it was that question of what part of this is bringing passion to me. I loved the animal side of things. For me personally, I didn't look at it as a full-time career. And I say that with as much heart as I possibly can. I still have very, very good friends that are very much in the zoo industry. They're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. For me, though, it was a path for me to be on at the time. It wasn't a path for me to be on permanently. So I really had to focus on myself and figure out, okay, is this really the space that I want to be in? And now, as I'm in that space, I'm still having these conversations with myself. And going back to what you were saying about wanting to feel approval, I feel like now we have so much work to do with the approval and validation, like all of these things that we seek from other people instead of ourselves. And there's been times in my past where I was called selfish, and I knew that I wasn't being selfish, that I was taking care of everybody else and the animals and the people and all of that. And now I look at that word very differently. And now if somebody calls me selfish, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm selfish. Like if I'm not taking care of myself, nobody else is going to take care of me first. So it's really been a hard transition, but I've been thankful to have these many moments to be able to pause and focus on myself, where I don't think everybody has those moments to be able to pause and focus on themselves. I mean, Sam, you're a great example. You've got a family. We were just talking about kiddos and baseball games and how do you find that balance for work and family? And it's hard, especially when you do want that validation and that approval from everybody.
Yeah, it's just an interesting thing. And I think what you said for me is the most poignant thing when you're trying to separate from those implied contracts is you have to identify yourself and what were implied contracts with you. What were things that you kind of just fell into and you got used to being in the habit of, but you don't even enjoy, they aren't serving you, they aren't making you happy. So I'm curious when you ask, like, well, I had to ask myself, what do I like about it? Or the why behind why I'm doing this. What were the elements that maybe a few different categories of questioning that you went down? Because nobody likes everything about their job. Nobody likes everything that happens. Nobody likes everything about being a parent, everything about cooking, everything about eating. Like there's certain things that are just like, okay, yeah, that part I could do without. Does that mean I don't do it? Does that mean I should not do it? No, but like some things, I love traveling. Do I love getting on an airplane? Do I love being at an airport? Do I love driving? No, there's a lot of things that I don't love, but I love traveling, and I love traveling way more than I don't like those things. And so I'm going to keep doing those things that help me travel. And so but there is a level where it's like, okay, what things do I not like? And so what were the elements or the different categories of your life that you examined to determine, hey, what exactly do I like about where I'm at? And what am I willing to give up to go do something else that undoubtedly has other things that you don't like doing, right? There's elements of working with people that you can't put them in a cage. You're not supposed to. You can't restrict their food. There's certain things you can't do with humans that you can do with animals. And so like, what was that process of like, okay, am I willing to make this jump or not?
Yeah. There were a couple of areas to me. One area was making a difference and an impact. I knew that working at the zoo, you're taking animals out for presentations, right? You're teaching people how to save animals. You're giving them that opportunity to connect, right? Like, how often is somebody going to have the chance to see a zebra 4 feet away? The reality is they're not. So that's why zoos exist, to be able to give you the opportunity to now be face to face with a zebra. And now you feel that connection. You're like, oh, I've seen a zebra. Now I need to go help save them. And that's where the conservation piece comes into play. For me, I looked at that and I knew, okay, yeah, I can make a difference here. But I also know that whether I'm at that zoo or not, the zoo is going to continue teaching people, and the zoo is going to continue bringing animals out for presentations, whether I'm there or not, right? Now, the people side of things, I learned very quickly that I was a very different leader with people. I was hands-on working with my team. Damn, I can't tell you how many times my team was like, Kindra, you don't have to do this with us. I'm like, says who? If I want to help set up chairs and tables, then I'm going to help you set up chairs and tables. They looked at that as such a weird thing for their leader to do. And I realized in that moment, I really had a chance to make a difference in a different capacity. I don't believe that that should be a weird thing. I think that leaders should be able to get dirty and help their team and be frontline with their team. And it's just not a normal thing, unfortunately. And so for me, that was one of the big categories, was how can I make a difference? Am I making a difference staying at the zoo, or am I making a difference if I am the leader overseeing and building teams? And I felt that side outweighed it a little bit. Another area I looked at was the big picture of the career. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without like sounding snooty, but I got to the point of, I want to make more money. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to take care of my mom. I don't want my mom to have to work until she's older. Like, I want her to be able to retire and have fun and go on trips. How am I going to do that off of the very small salary that you make working in a zoo? And that's the reality, is they don't make a ton of money. Should they make more? Absolutely. Are they? Nope. And so when I looked at it from a career aspect and a money aspect, it wasn't there. For me to be able to grow and actually take care of my family financially in a bigger way, it wasn't going to happen if I stayed at the zoo. And then the last area that I really looked at was the connection piece. You have seen me. I am a connector. Whether it's you're looking for somebody to dog sit your dogs while you're on vacation, or you are a stressed CEO trying to build the culture of your company, I'm a connector. And I love being able to do that at the scale that I can do that now versus the scale that I could do that when I was working at the zoo. Because again, those contracts we have, right? I was looked at as the zoo lady, the animal lady. And so I'm not going to be everyone's go-to. If I'm working with animals, that's what they look at me as. The girl at the zoo working with animals, right? And then the nerdy girl at the zoo. Whereas now I've positioned my space and positioned myself with my company as a community of resources. And so now people do come to me for some random stuff, I will say, but I usually have the answer, which is probably more random. But I've positioned myself in a space to really be a connector. And that was one of those areas I looked at before as I was making this transition. And now I really get to be that connector where I really wasn't able to when I was in the zoo industry.
I think that those are three huge areas that we could have a whole podcast on each of them. I'm sure. You know, but this is just the highlights here. So difference in impact, career, and big picture, like income wise. And then what do you feel like your giftedness is? And if your giftedness is leadership and not just being a leader, but teaching leadership, and you see yourself doing something differently, that's a good indication that if you feel like you're different or other people are recognizing your difference, that's an idea of your giftedness. That's an idea of, wow, people are holding me out as this. I was talking to somebody, and it took me a long time to figure this out. Like, well, what is Sam's giftedness? Like, what is the thing that Sam is uniquely, we'll say, qualified to do? And you might, well, you're not that unique. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm not that unique, but I do know that my hugs are really, really good. Okay. One, because I love them. But two, most of the people who know me and have been around me in physical proximity have gotten a hug, and they look forward to a hug, and they ask for a hug before I leave, right? It's like, well, why is that? And how am I profiting from that? I don't know. I'm not making any money from it. But the point is, that's an area that's an above average giftedness. If you walk into a house and people introduce you by saying, have you had a Sam hug? You can't leave until you, like, if that's how you're being introduced. There's a lot of other values that I bring to society and to people, but if I'm actually okay being introduced that way, I believe that I really enjoy that level of connection. And so it's just funny, like, what is your giftedness? Does that mean that you can't do anything other than give hugs? No, you can go give hugs, but there's other areas to do that. And is there ways to monetize it? Probably. I haven't figured it out yet. But I also don't think it's selfish. If you're listening and thinking, yeah, that is selfish that she wanted more money. Why do you want more? That's a good question. Does she want more so she can go buy more cars or more jewelry or maybe a little bit of that? And that's okay if that's part of it. But she wanted to give her mom, her family, an experience that they never would have got without her. And she recognized that there's a gift that she has that could provide that. Yeah. And I think that that's a huge deal. And then the difference and the impact. This is just a funny side note. I'm just curious. I did not ever know this, if this is the cause of zoos or the reason that zoos exist. I never, ever thought that the reason the zoo existed was so that it could educate the public to care more about the planet. Never in my mind have I ever associated that mission with the zoo. And you might think you're a real dunce, Sam. You're probably right.
You're not, Sam. Let me caveat that and say that is why the good zoos exist. Okay. If you are driving across country and there's this little mom and pop zoo on the side of the road and you're like, hey, let's go. And they're like, hey, pay to hold a lion cub in a photo. Okay, those are not the zoos I'm talking about. They're not accredited. But if you are visiting an AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, if you're visiting an accredited facility, that's literally why they exist, to be able to educate the public on conservation and give you that opportunity so that you can be close and you could see a tiger and you could see a lion and you could see a polar bear. When in reality, most people are not going to see those animals in the wild.
I mean, you're right that most people are not going to see them. I go just because I want to take a picture and say that I got to see this animal. So like,
I mean, see, but you saw it.
I did, but I don't know that I felt like any more connected to the land or like, oh man, we should really take care of these things because they're extinct. It's like, I'm glad I got a picture before it died. So
see, but it's there a little bit, see, because you said it. You're glad you got a picture before it died.
Yeah, I'm glad I was here for this. So it's actually funny because the sponsor of our podcast is called the Animal Alliance, and their whole storyline of what they're trying to accomplish is to provide spay and neuter programs so that there's less overpopulation on the planet of animals. And it's the animalalliance.org. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can go there. But it's a fascinating thing because when they first approached me about being a sponsor, I'm like, I don't really love the animals. It's not really the thing. It's not that I don't love animals. I love animals. I don't really care that way about animals, we'll say. And it was interesting talking to Thomas Klein. He's the founder of the organization, but he grew up where his mom was like an animal sanctuary. And he said they would almost always have 20 to 25 dogs or cats or something in their house, rescues that they were trying to rehome and reposition. And it just like broke his heart that you have to actually euthanize. Like when there's overpopulation, then they euthanize the animals. They say, okay, we can't take care of these. And it's better to, rather than let them suffer and die because there's no food, we just put them out of their misery early and say, have a nice day. I don't know what they do with them, honestly, but some to China, maybe. I don't know.
But they align, your sponsor aligns with what zoos do, right?
Yeah.
If they're an accredited facility, they're not taking animals from the wild. They're not like, hey, we're low on stock for tigers. Let's go grab one from the wild so that we can have one in this enclosure. Now, zoos way back 100 years ago, yeah, they were a little sketch like that. They just wanted you to see animals up close. Like Sam thinks that is normal.
I would think that more like the circus. And so maybe I just like my first interaction with big animals like this was actually at a circus in Utah. And I'm not saying they were unethical or rude or that they were mistreating animals. I also, just to be clear, I don't support mistreatment of animals, and I don't like suffering. I don't like watching anything die. And so that is another reason why I chose to allow them to sponsor the podcast. I'm like, okay, less suffering is always a good thing.
Yes.
And if that means a quick death versus a slow death, that's less suffering to me. I don't want to watch either death. Like, I don't like any of it. So, but I think that that's an important thing. So identifying where you can have this impact and then aligning yourself with people who are there. I want to ask a question here. What about taking care of animals was so important to you right in the beginning? Like, why was it the animals that you were drawn to? Do you ever ask yourself that?
A really good question, actually, that I haven't necessarily asked myself in the past, but I've thought about it recently, in that it's another way of caring for beings. So as I was growing up, right, I was the youngest. Everyone in the house cared for me. I mean, my brother and I, we kind of got along. But at the end of the day, he was still a big brother, right? To be protective of me. My mom went above and beyond for us and our family. My dad, I was the little princess. I could do anything and be like, Dad. And so I was the one that everybody took care of. So if I look back on it now, I look at it as that was my opportunity to be able to take care of something, while also learning at the same time. So growing myself while caring for something else. And it's interesting now because at this point in my life, I don't have any kids. I have one plant that's barely surviving. I'm pretty proud of my little bamboo plant though. And I'm continuously taking care of everybody else. And I'm really, really, really having to work at taking time for myself. And I looked at the fact that I could say yes to helping people dog sitting. I looked at that as like, oh, I'm getting to take care of myself while also taking care of them and their pets. And then I really had to think about it. Somebody that you and I know recently just said, yeah, but Kindra, when are you not in service to others? And I was like,
this is actually the root. This is actually the root of my question. Right. Is again, I'm trying to identify like the little things that most people are not seeing when they meet somebody. And also, maybe it's something you see about yourself. Maybe it's something you don't see about yourself. So I also love to help people see things in themselves that they didn't actually see before. So maybe this is one of those things. But do you feel like it was, you mentioned earlier that you felt like you were weird as a child. Or maybe like, maybe not weird. I don't know. You said weird, so I'm gonna say weird. But like,
I was a nerd for sure.
Nerd, interesting, have lots of different things. Do you feel like it was easier to be accepted by animals than by people?
Ooh, that's a good question as well. I wasn't that nerdy.
Okay, I'm just asking. I'm just trying to identify what's the gravitational pull. Because if it's easier to associate initially with animals than people, then you're more comfortable there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something to recognize.
Yeah. I think it has to do, okay, it's all clicking. Sam, you're pulling it out. I think it has to do with the relationships and building relationships. So when you are working with an animal, that animal speaks a very different language than you. I don't come in on day one and be like, hey, alligator, I'm going to pick you up. You're going to stay relaxed. And then we're going to go see some people and I'm going to put you back and everything's going to go well. That alligator has no idea what the hell I'm saying to it, right? So the way that I communicate is through building trust and building the relationship and the consistency of working with that animal, right? And so fast forward through the stages of my life and what I've done and what I do now, I'm really good at building relationships. I'm really good at figuring out the pieces that make you happy and how do I follow up on that later? And how do I connect on that later? And so when you look at it from a perspective with animals, right, you're not speaking the same language, but you're building that connection. So that piece, I think, is the piece that if I can connect to the past and connect it to now, it's building relationships. I've always been able to build relationships. If you and I don't speak the same language, we're going to figure out how to build a relationship. You speak Spanish, I speak English, you speak Japanese, whatever. I've always been able to figure out how to build relationships. And I think that's the foundational piece of working with animals. It didn't matter that it was an alligator or a tortoise or an anteater or a baboon. I knew how to build those relationships. Or my dog at home. I was always the one that could get the dog to do stuff and nobody else could. So I think it's building the relationships even when there is a communication barrier that's so different.
So that's you grow up, you become a volunteer, you're helping, building these relationships with animals. How much management, because you became a trainer, so you got to live on both sides, but you first got trained on how to build this relationship with animals. Mm-hmm. What was probably the most impactful thing that somebody trained you on to build a relationship with animals? And I'll ask another question after.
Oh. The consistency piece, that you have to keep doing it. And it might be the same exact thing, and it might be so damn monotonous, but you continue with whatever those actions are over and over and over and over again. And then one of my other trainers gave me the complete opposite advice, and both of them I've stuck to. So the consistency piece, and then I was given advice actually by the gal who trained me when we were working with polar bears, of finding what works. So the behavior might be the consistent piece that we're trying to teach, but if the reward I'm giving that polar bear is not hitting home, if that polar bear is like, man, you're trying to give me the meat that I'm going to have for dinner, lady. Like, I'm going to get that food later anyway. Or a bloodsicle, or one of the things that polar bears love the most as a treat is actually frozen crickets. Like, who would have thought that a polar bear would just inhale a handful of crickets and love it? And so both of those trainers gave me really good advice, very different. And I've used all of it, the consistency of just keep going and going and going. And then the other piece of like, figure out what works.
So generally, if somebody's aware of the advice they were given, they had been told it many, many times before they actually understood it and decided, okay, this is a paradigm shift, that this is now not just a suggestion, this is a new law of my life. So what was the experience that solidified that advice into your mind?
Of the two trainers?
Yeah, both of those, yeah.
One was, I was working with, and I'll give animal examples for this. I was working with a hyacinth macaw, and they're a very big bird with a very big beak. And if you don't have a relationship with that animal, they will do some serious damage. One little bite will turn into a big problem. And when I was at the San Diego Zoo, I was one of the lead trainers with this particular hyacinth macaw. And one of the things that I could do with this bird was I could actually let him play in the tree. I could put him in the tree. I could leave him up there for 20 minutes. And then after about 15, 20 minutes, I made sure I gave him plenty of time. If they're like little kids, you got to let them go play on a playground. Then I could call him back down and go, okay, Sam, time to go. And he would climb right back down, come to me, and then we could leave. None of the other trainers could do this with him. And it's because they would take him, they'd do a presentation, put him back. Take him, do a presentation, put him back. So the consistency in that relationship was, okay, well, I'm just going to go out for 10 minutes and come right back, and go and come right back. When I would take him, we'd be in the office, we'd do presentations, we'd just walk around the zoo. I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours with this bird. So when it got to the point of just letting this bird that could have flown away at any moment, letting him climb around in the tree, and then being able to just be like, hey, time to go, let's go. Everyone else was like, I don't understand how you can do this. Well, I can do it because we built that relationship, right? So that's an example on the consistency piece. On the reward side, right, and figuring out what works, I'll share an example from working with teams. At one point, I was managing a team. I had engineers that worked for me or worked with me, and I had customer success folks that worked with me. And the customer success team, early risers, they were on the computer first thing in the morning. My engineers, they were on the computer late at night. They just wanted to be like 10 o'clock at night, let me do my work. And so I had to figure out that balance between both of them. And instead of just throwing structure to say, this is the time frame we're going to work during the day, because it wasn't working, right? That was what was implemented before I came into my role. I was able to figure out, okay, well, they like early mornings, they like evenings. How can I play this and wiggle this so that it works the best for them? And we can still check in as a team. So we just completely redid the schedule. There was no longer a 9 to 5. We had a couple hours in the middle of the day where we checked in, and that was all I cared about. I don't care if you work at 10 o'clock at night, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I don't give a shit as long as the work's getting done and you're taking care of yourself. And that was the sweet spot. That's all I had to do. And then everyone was just happy and content and then wanting to go above and beyond too. Even though all I was requiring was a quick couple hours in the middle of the day. I had to figure out what would work, and I had to adjust schedules to figure out the right piece of the puzzle.
And I think both of these things, so we haven't really mentioned the name of her actual company now, and it's not been intentional, but it's right now, it's the right time to bring it in. So your company is Culture Crush. Yeah.
Correct.
And one of she's training humans, but she also is she wants to help people improve culture. She's super connected with HR departments and helping people improve their culture. This one thing that, I never know where these conversations are going to go. So I'm really grateful when they go somewhere great. But the difference between, we're going to end on this topic here, but the difference between objectifying versus humanizing. And it's so easy. And I'm bringing this up because it's something that I become aware every so often. Last night it happened again. I'm just like, geez, I'm such a loser, right? My habits took over, and that sucks. So I was sitting on my phone, just playing on my phone, and my kids would come in and come out and come in and come out, and I would address them, take care of what needed to be done. They would leave, and I'd get back on my phone. And finally, I'm sitting here, and I just I threw my phone on the desk. My wife's like, "What's going on? Are you upset?" I'm like, "No, I'm not upset." I just realized that my phone is now enslaved me, right? And my kids have been watching TV for 3 hours, and it's just for no reason, because I've been sitting here watching reels for 3 hours. Nothing valuable has happened. So I put it down. I was like, "Hey, let's go play a game." Play the game, have lots of fun. But the point is that the moment when I realized, which I hope it happens less and less as I realize it more and more, that I'm so selfish or selfish absorbed, the negative side of the selfish, that I view everybody and everything, in your case, animals, as just a, what do they call it? CPUs, computer non-players, or not, whatever they are, just random people in my life. They're all supporting me in my hero role of my own story, rather than recognizing that each person is an individual human. And sometimes I get to the end of the day and recognize that even though I've been working from home all day, I've had multiple interactions with my kids, I haven't taken the time to see my children. And they're in my life, they're no different than the microphone, the chair, the computer. They're just another thing that requires energy to maneuver, but not address or humanize. And what you described in both of those experiences was you humanized the bird. You recognized the bird had feelings, emotions, desires, interests, whatever. And you said, okay, I'm going to treat that animal with respect. And same thing when you go to this, it's really easy as an employer to say, well, I want what's most convenient for me. So these are the hours we're working. Leave or stay, but this is it. You can do that. But it's not great for the culture because people don't feel loved, feel respected, feel addressed, feel cared about. They don't feel important. They feel like you're making your life more important than what they would prefer. There is a balance, right? You have to find a balance between like, well, we actually do have to do certain things during business hours when the rest of the world operates. Like, it's not my thing, it's the thing. Like, so
Right?
just like the bird can't just be out all the time. He does have to go back to his cage. Like, he has to at some point. So how do you make that happen? So I know I just gave a long monologue on it, but now your turn. How do you, like, how conscious are you of the humanization when you're training other people, when you're training others to work with animals? Was it just like, well, this is what works, I found out the right carrot? Or were you like, no, this is an intentional part of leadership. This is an intentional part of being me, is to humanize others?
I do it probably more than others because it's the space that I've grown and built into it. And I wish it was more common when people are training teams and connecting with teams. But I'm going to bring it full circle from some of the stuff that you're talking about. You're building relationships, not looking at the components as these identical pawns, right? You're not looking at it as, cool, you're all the same Legos. You have to look at it from the perspective of everybody being unique and different. That treat, that cookie, that carrot, whatever, is going to be different for everybody that you interact with. So figuring out, okay, what is the key to this person? I need to get to know that person before I figure out what the reward, the key, the cookie, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, for all of us, it's about giving people time and attention. If you give them time and attention, they're going to feel seen. They're going to want to give that back to you. And in whatever capacity it is, they're going to want to give it back to you. And I say full circle moment when it comes to time and attention, because Sam, that is why you are the best hugger. The difference when you hug versus other people hug, when other people hug, they hug to hug in that moment and then they let go. You hug and you give the other person the moment to let go. So that child gets to feel seen and felt and comforted by you until they choose to let go. Or if it's somebody at a networking event, right? You don't let go. Maybe it gets to like an awkward moment. They might not know you and they might be like, but you're giving them the time and attention. It's not just a quick hug. Oh, I'm doing this because I'm a hugger. Like, that's not what it is. You're giving them that moment of comfort to feel seen and to have that moment of time and attention until they decide to break that moment or the kid decides to break that moment. At the end of the day, it's time and attention. And if you give the time and attention, you're going to learn all about the other piece and the relationships are just going to blossom.
Awesome. I love it. We're going to end it there. That was really good. Thank you for the compliment. I haven't thought of it that way. And I appreciate that light on that subject. If somebody wanted to, we didn't even get to like a lot of things that we could have got to. So
that's okay.
You just need to go find her. But where would somebody go to find you, interact with you, if they want to know more about how you could serve their company, their culture? Where would they go to do that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and all of that. I would say that LinkedIn is probably another place that's the best area to find me, especially when it's the corporate side of things. That's just where companies tend to find me. So I'm all over LinkedIn. I post all the time.
Okay. Do you have a specific website that is just yours?
You can go to you and I had this conversation. You can go to the main website, which is culturecrushbusiness.com. But when it comes to Kindra and all things Kindra nerdy, Kindra related, you can find me on my Instagram, kindra.maples, or LinkedIn.
Yeah. Her Instagram's pretty fun. I think you should go to her Instagram. LinkedIn is cool if you want the business side of her, but her Instagram's pretty cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom. Again, if you're interested in another one, Kindra, just schedule another one because I have a lot more questions that we didn't talk about.
We could do part 2 for sure.
Yeah. But thank you so much. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.